The Torah tells us in Parashas Acharimoz, Kamaisa Eretz Mitzrayim, Shelo Yishab, that we shouldn't learn from the ways of the Egyptians, and other places we'll find in the Torah it says about imitating the ways of the Egyptians and going back there. Part of the pasuk of not following B'chukas Hagayim. So since what's going on in Egypt today, and people were actually asking me, someone was asking me a question the other day. If someone was a reporter, I guess you saw Jewish reporters in Egypt. I mean, not safe if you're a Canadian or American reporter there, but a Jewish reporter, he wasn't asking from the safety point. That might be a problem as well. But in terms of going back to Egypt, visiting Egypt, is there a problem for a Jewish reporter or Jewish anyone to go and go down there? So we'll give some general background and we'll answer that question. In fact, Rabbi Yosef already discussed this question a while ago. We'll get to it in a minute. So the Torah tells us in 3 different places about the prohibition to go back to Egypt. It's not something where if you opened up a Chumash you'd actually say, hey, this is what the Torah is telling me. But from the Yerushalmi and the Gemara, there's a pasuk in Beshalach, there's a couple in Devarim, I think one in Kisavo, that they have they quote three different psukim in terms of the prohibition of living in Egypt. So in fact, it's a famous Kaftor of Perach. He was one of the first people to go back to Egypt, and he claims he spoke with the Einik Loch of the Rambam, and he asked him how the Rambam could live in Egypt. So he writes in his article, he writes, the kids and the Einik Loch told the Kaftor of Perach, the Rambam signed his letters, Ha'over b'chol yom shlosh lavim. I violated every day 3 lavim, which itself is a discussion in the Rishonim whether you actually violate 3 or you violate 1. But it sounds better that you violate 3 every day. That's what the Rambam signed his letters. However, it's very difficult. It's probably not true because we don't find any letters from the Rambam that actually says that. We have no letters that I'm aware of, and then when I looked up the articles and people spoke to me, there are no articles actually the Rambam writing that. And in fact, Rabbi Yosef had this question years ago when they had the peace treaty with Egypt, with Sadat. So different reporters, I guess from Israel, might have asked them, what's the story? Could we go down and report the scene? So in his discussion, he quotes the Kaftor of Perach and says it's not true. We don't find anywhere. We have no record of the Rambam ever writing that he's in violation of the Shlosh Lavim. So therefore,
I don't understand. So it's a made up. It's not true.
No, he's saying not. He's not saying either. I'm not sure if he's not saying the story is not true, or maybe that's what they did say. But he's saying it's not true that the Rambam didn't write it. Not that they didn't say it. The Kaftor of Perach actually, he claims that I think he's debating the fact that it's true. I don't know whether he's getting into the Enoch actually said that, and the Kaftor, who's misquoting who. That's not clear. But in terms of Rabbi Yosef quotes this statement that the Rambam lived in Egypt and sinned, violating 3 Averas every day, that's not true. I'm not sure whether he's saying the Einik Loch lying or the Kaftor of Perach. But either way, he says it's not true because we don't find anywhere that the Rambam ever writing this. In any of it, we have many letters and other things from the Rambam, and we don't find it ever that he wrote this. So the question is then,
and why are the Einik Loch in Israel?
Right.
I mean, in Egypt.
Yeah. So the question is why was the Rambam?
Well, he was forced.
Yeah, that's what we'll get to. I'm saying, but
why were the Einik Loch?
Yeah, not only the Einik, but this is not just the Rambam. Many Gedolim, many other Gedolim also lived in Egypt. They had Jewish communities in Egypt.
The Gemara talks
about
Alexander.
Yeah. So
biggest shul in the world.
Right. Exactly. So why was the Rambam? Why was the Rambam living in? Even if you don't accept that he violated 3 lavim, but what was the hetzer then for the Rambam, and not just the Rambam, for anyone, for other Gedolim will use the Rambam, he's the most famous, and what was the hetzer for the Rambam and other Gedolim and Jewish communities to live in Egypt? Even if you want to say the Sat Apr, even though he didn't sign it, okay, he didn't sign letters, but how does he deal with the prohibition? So we're going to give different. So interesting. A lot of people give explanations in the Rambam. We're going to see you can't give this pshat in the Rambam. But the answer might be okay in its own right, but it's hard to say it's pshat in the Rambam, as we'll see. The first one actually is a Ritva in Yuma. The Ritva in Yuma, he writes that when is the Isser, when is the prohibition of living in Eretz Mitzrayim, when does that apply? That applies only Bizman Beis HaMikdash Kayam, when the Beis HaMikdash is up and the Jews are living in the land, then we say there's a prohibition to live in Mitzrayim. However, Bizman Hazeh, he writes, when we no longer have a Beis HaMikdash, his lashon is Kol Chutz La'aretz Shava. Once we don't have a Beis HaMikdash anymore, all of Chutz La'aretz is equal, and therefore there's no difference. Obviously there are differences, but in terms of the prohibition of living in Egypt, then there is the prohibition is limited to the time when the Jewish people and they had the Beis HaMikdash in there. But today, Bizman Hazeh, during his time, that the Jews do not have the Beis HaMikdash, and the Jews are living all over the world. So Egypt is no different than Toronto, California, LA, etc. And in fact, that's what the Ritva writes. It's a fine answer if you want to accept it's the Ritva.
It takes the psukim a little bit out of context.
Yeah, same. But
they were said before the Beis HaMikdash was built.
I know, not only that, but right. Also, we'll see it takes that because you see that, and we'll see from another answer that the issue seems to apply right away. Not as we'll see. One answer is going to be from Eretz Yisrael, as we'll get to, but right. But the psukim, right. But Pisvara, the Ritva says it, so he's a bar hachi. The only problem is you can't say this pshat in the Rambam. Why can't you say this pshat in the Rambam? That the Rambam holds the prohibition is only Bizman Beis HaMikdash Kayam and not now. Because if you look at the Rambam, what does the Rambam write? The Rambam writes, Mutter Lishchon B'chol Ha'olam is permitted to live anywhere in the world, Chutz Mi Mitzrayim. You're allowed to live anywhere in the world except Mitzrayim. So clearly, the Rambam doesn't accept the distinction of the Ritva, that the Rambam holds Mitzrayim is a difference. There is a difference between Toronto, New York, California. There's a special prohibition in the Chumash that says not to live in Mitzrayim. And that applies to Mitzrayim more so than any other nation. In fact, it's the Rambam L'Shitason that the Rambam writes Mutta Lishchon, that's at some point out, that Mutta Lishchon B'chol Ha'olam, in other words, because we know there's a famous machlokes or possible machlokes, the Rambam and the Ramban on the nature, on the mitzvah of Yeshivas Eretz Yisrael, on the mitzvah of living in Eretz Yisrael. So the Ramban, he writes it explicitly. He writes it's a mitzvah chiyuvis, it's an obligation, a chov on everyone, that they have to live in Eretz Yisrael. He learns that as a mitzvah chiyuvis. The Rambam is silent on the matter. He doesn't discuss it. So the question, a lot of the commentators discuss what's the pshat in the Rambam. Why doesn't he put it? So one pshat is because he doesn't hold this a mitzvah. That's why he didn't write it. And the discussion. Others say no. He holds it's a mitzvah. He also agrees with the Ramban that there's a mitzvah deraisa to live in Eretz Yisrael. Said, why didn't he write it? So there's a famous Avnei Nezer that writes. The Rambam writes in his Hakdama. He gives us different kolam, different rules. And one of the rules he says, when I have certain mitzvahs, I don't count them all. If I have a couple mitzvahs that have the same purpose, I'm only going to count one. So the Avnei Nezer writes that the Rambam counted the mitzvah that when you enter Eretz Yisrael, you have a mitzvah to throw out the Zayin Amamim, the 7 nations. So the Avnei Nezer asks, so what's the mitzvah? Okay, let's go in, we'll attack the 7 nations, throw them out, get rid of them with a Zara, then I'll move back to New York, I'll move back to Toronto. Obviously the mitzvah is to go there and live there. So the Rambam included in the mitzvah of throwing out the Zayin Amamim. Or, I just read recently, like a very interesting pshat. one wanted to claim the Rambam counts it in the mitzvah of Birkas Hamazon, because the bracha praises the land of Eretz Yisrael. Again, more of a big chiddush. That's not what the pshat is. I just read that like last week. That was interesting pshat in the Rambam. The Rambam counts the mitzvah. I think I read in one of the articles because what was the topic? The topic I think was actually Mishpatim. I guess it was last week. It's the famous the kasha of Rabbi Selevan Diskin that the Torah begins with Eved Ivri. So we know 6 years you shall work and 7 years, 7th year free. And then he wants to say, since there's a law, you have to treat an Eved so properly. One pillow, he gets it. If you eat chicken, he gets chicken. If you get steak, he gets steak. You have to treat the Eved. You treat him so well, what's going to happen after 7 years, 6 years? He wants to stay. So we all know, if he wants to stay, so he has to do nirtz, he has to pierce the ear. And it's an onish. You pierce the ear, different pshatim, but the ear that heard Har Sinai, either not to steal, or the ear that heard you be an eved to God, a servant to no one else, so therefore you're punished. So the Yeshua Lev Diskin asked, so why, if it's an onish, so why are you doing it now? Why did you pierce the person stole 6 years ago? If Avdus is a onish, so why didn't you pierce the ear right away? So the Rabbi Lev Diskin points out, he says, no, really, the onish was put in slavery. That person's a free person, free choice. That's what the whole purpose of the world is. We're supposed to be an Eved Hashem. But apparently, like we see, like certain times, some people, like in the movie Shawshank Redemption, now you see the person basically about people in jail, and then how they lived in jail the whole life. Once they come out to the real world, or to them the real world is jail, but to the other world, they just can't function. They commit suicide, and they don't know what to do. The guy didn't even know, cross the street, read, he was totally lost. So similarly here, with an Eved, it's supposed to be a punishment, but obviously he's beginning to like it. Well, it's great. Someone support me, have steak every night, have this party. Who needs to be free anymore? So that's the pshat. He says, once you realize that now that obviously being a slave wasn't an onish, so now you have to go ahead and give the person an onish. So the point was Rav Shechter adds to that where it comes to Eretz Yisrael. That he points, that's where Rav Shechter adds about. That's what we have to realize. Since 1948, when we got Eretz Yisrael, we have to realize it's a gift from Hashem. We know because of our sins we were exiled, and we have to realize this Golus is an onish. Today we're very comfortable in Golus, and we don't want to have another. We want Golus to be the onish. If we're so comfortable in Golus, we don't want God to send another punishment on. So we have to appreciate. If you appreciate the gift of Eretz Yisrael, we won't have to get another type of onish. So someone threw in over there about Eretz Yisrael being in Birkas Hamazon. But getting back, so that's what the Rambam. So the Rambam, it can't be pshat in the Rambam. The Rambam writes, it's mutter to live anywhere in the world except Egypt, and it's the Rambam Shitason. The Rambam holds there at least no mitzvah, simple pshat in the Rambam. Anyway, there is no obligation to live in Eretz Yisrael. So the Rambam can write that all the place called Chutz La'aretz Shava, and we don't have a Beis HaMikdash, so you can live anywhere you want. But so it's a nice pshat by the Ritva that the Isra only applies when there's a Beis HaMikdash, but when there's no Beis HaMikdash, you can live in Egypt, but you can't say that pshat in the Rambam. So we have to try another explanation. There's another famous answer from the Mari Kash, the Rav Yaakov Castro. He wanted to say a different chiddush. What was the heter for the Rambam, and not just the Rambam, for a lot of the great people?
Why did he need a heter? He didn't have a choice. He ran for his life initially. Right.
So forget about we'll get to that answer at the end. Oh. I don't want to ruin that. Then I have nothing else to say. So the Rambam writes that. I said it doesn't necessarily have to be the Rambam. Throw out someone else. It doesn't have to be the Rambam, but Rambam is just an example. But someone who chose to be there. So they point out that his chiddush is that what do we say the Isser of living in Egypt? That's only in the place, the old Egypt, like Alexandria, as the Gemara says, that where the Jews were actually slaves, and the Jews, the Gemara in Sukkot says they were punished. But Alexandria was the old country, therefore you can't go back to where the Jews were slaves. But he claims Cairo where the riots are happening now, is a new city. It's not part of the classical Egypt in the Torah, and therefore, perhaps there's no Isser. Rambam wasn't living in Egypt, he was living in Cairo, and in fact he wants to bring a raya from Hilchis Gittin, from the laws of Get, that he writes in the laws of Get. So what do you write? So, or it doesn't have to be a Get, but what do you write in an Extruva? You say Thornhill, Samach, Toronto? What do they write?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's what he says. They write Cairo, Samach, Egypt. In fact, it's not. A lot of people will claim Thornhill's not Toronto, but he's claiming.
Rambam wasn't in Cairo, was he?
That's what they. Yeah, that's what
Rambam was in Cairo?
That's what they say.
That isn't no entry.
I mean, according to Marikash, he was in. That's what I heard he was in Cairo. So therefore, he claims that the Isser is only in the places where the Jews were enslaved, and therefore there was no problem of living in Cairo. Again, very interesting explanation, but the problem is if you look at. It's difficult to say anyway that, because if that's the case, the Torah seems to make a big deal about the Nile River. If they had the other port cities around, so what was the big deal about the Nile? But even if you look at the Rambam, when he seems to give the geography of those area of Egypt, he seems to include that whole area, and Cairo seems to. So it's difficult to say within the Rambam anyway, because the Rambam seems to include Cairo as part of Egypt when he writes in his definitions of Egypt. So again, a very interesting explanation from the Marikash, but difficult to say the pshat in the Rambam, because the Rambam himself seems to say that Cairo was considered part of Egypt. So moving along to A3, the third possibility. The pre-Chadash, that's an interesting suggestion that people want to tie into the Rambam. That the pre-Chadash writes, or before we get to the pre-Chadash, Rabbi Selevan, the Sefer Yereim, one of the Rishonim, he wants to say that the Isser, he wants to limit the prohibition of going to Egypt is only from Israel to Egypt. It's only the way that they went from Egypt to Israel. In fact, some Rishonim want to say even further that why does the Torah go into in Parashas Maseh? It talks about the 42 steps. It goes into all the details exactly how the Jews left Egypt. So some want to say even more that the Isser is specifically, if you follow the exact 42 ways that the Jews went from Egypt to Israel, if you go back that way, then you violate. In fact, Eldon Hadani from the Ethiopian Jews, so he writes in one of his places, says, we were very careful when we went from Israel to Egypt, we were very careful not to go back the same way that the Jews, when they left Eretz Mitzrayim, came to Israel. So it's very difficult to say that the Anshe Alexandria, that people with such lahachas that they dafka, wasn't the straight route, that they dafka went to go in. But that's what the Rabbi Selevan says, the Isser is going back, and someone even taking it even further.
Well, the Pasuk says that.
The what?
We'll
see right.
Yeah.
So, and that's where he gets it from, and therefore, but some say not just going from Eretz Yisrael to Egypt, but the specific derech, that was problematic as well. So the going the exact way. So again, it's difficult on one to say that the people, the Dafka, would go back that way. But again, a nice, interesting explanation. And one of the psukim also, but derech hazeh, there is some basis on the psukim. But again, we can't give this pshat in the Rambam. Why not? Why can't we give this pshat in the Rambam? That the only time it's us to go back to Egypt is to go from Israel to Egypt. Because what do we see from the Rabbi Selevan in the Sefer Yereim? What is the Isser? What is the Geder Haris Isser of? Isser is in living in Egypt, according to what this pshat is saying. The Isser is Baderach Hazeh. The Isser is specifically going from Israel to Egypt, whether it's specifically the 42 ways or anyway. So you can't, flying from Israel, are there any flights from Israel to Egypt? But specifically from Israel to Egypt, that's the prohibition. And however, you can't say this pshat in the Rambam, because the Rambam, as I'll show you in a minute, does not hold the Isser is in going, the Isser is the yeshiva. The Isser is actually living in Mitzrayim, because as we wrote, as the Rambam, Mutta Lishlo Mechol Chutz Mitzrayim. So where do we see the Rambam Shita that the Isser is actually yeshiva? So we see it from the following, because the Rambam, when he talks about the prohibition of going down to Egypt, so he has the Heterim also. So they talk about Shlomo HaMelech and all that, that for business purposes, if you're going for business, one is permitted to go down to Egypt. In other words, the issue is going down is because you're going to learn from, you just want to, you should learn from them. So when you're going on business, the assumption is you'll be busy working all day, you're not going to be focused on the pyramids and the riots and everything else, and you're going to be focused on your business in and out. That's why, that's why some say, according to the Rambam, to visit Egypt is usher, because the heter is only for business because and he says to go temporarily down for business, that's okay, but to visit, why are you going? What does a tourist go for? You want to learn from the country. That's exactly the issue. We don't want you to learn about Egypt. So there's a kula and a chumrah. You could go down on a business trip, but you can't go on a. So make sure you plan your visit around your business trip. But you go down on a business trip to the Rambam. So what does the Rambam write? So the Rambam writes, what happens if someone violates the prohibition of whatever the prohibition is? Let's assume living in Egypt. Does he get makis? Because when you violate a lav, it's usually associated with makis, a good old-fashioned muppin. So what about is the makis? So the Rambam writes no makis if one violates the prohibition of living in Egypt. Why not? So he says it's a lav she'ein bo maisa. He considers it a lav which doesn't have an why is it a lav she'ein bo maisa? So the Rambam tells us because. What do you mean it's a lav she'ein bo maisa? Because I just said that so what happens the following? Let's say you're born there, by the way. Maybe that's the maisa, but let's say you're born there, but the Rambam's example is, let's say you go down, you're permitted, you go down for business. You know how things work out. It starts off business. I'm here all the time. It's really great here. Let me stay. So a person who initially went down for business purposes, so he went down beheter, and then after a while he changed his mind. His temporary trip became a permanent one. So therefore you were already in Egypt, so you weren't going. So therefore the Rambam Shipa Lav She'ein Bo Maisa is that even if I do an at Maisa, even if I actually go down to Egypt Isser, it's still not defined as a Lav She'esh Bo Maisa, because any time, if there's a way I could violate the Lav without doing a Maisa, so even if I do a Maisa, the Maisa is incidental. It's in a definition. It's a famous discussion. The Rabbi will and that's what the famous Rama by Losach mode. There's a whole discussion on Losach mode. Is there a difference between Losach mode, Losisave? So the Rama basically has different levels. The Rama level number one is basically like you're walking down the street. You want this person's car, his iPad, or whatever you want. So that's invalid. It's an Isser Midos. You shouldn't. It's not a good thing, but it's nothing to do with Lo Sachma and Lo Sisave. What's the difference between Lo Sisave and not the desire of Lo Sachma? So the Rambam writes, Lo Sisave is you make a plan of attack. You get together, how am I going to get this from him? So that's but you don't actually do it. You plan, but you're not successful. Lo Sachma is you plan and you're successful. So the Rambam writes, you don't violate Lo Sachma until you actually get the object. So the Rambam, he said you violate Lo Sachma. That's how some answer up the famous kasha to Even Ezra. The Even Ezra's kasha. How could the Torah regulate our thoughts? It's hard enough to control our actions. The God's going to tell me I can't help it. I'm coveting someone else's property. So with the Rambam, it's no kasha. You're not violating Lo Sachma until you actually take it. But the Rambam writes that you don't violate Lo Sachma until Yasa Hamaisa. So, and in the same line, 2 lines right in the paragraph, the next line, and the Rambam writes, and by the way, maybe I forgot to mention to you, you don't get makas on Lo Sachma because it's a lav she'ein bo maisa. You don't get makas on Lo Sachma because there's no action. So the Ravid goes screaming Chai v'Kayim on the Rambam. What did you just write 2 seconds ago? You wrote, you only violate Lo Sachma if you did a Maisa, and then 2 seconds later you're writing Lav she'ein bo maisa. So there's a famous brisker of Steip where all the briskers, all the Achronim say this pshat in the Rambam. That what's the pshat? No, really, the Isser lo sachmod is an Isser belev. But the question is, it's much harder to figure out who's a tzaddik versus who's a chacham. A chacham you can give a little test to, you can hear a shir, you might get some idea who's a talmid chacham, who isn't. Tzaddik is much more mystical. It's hard to figure out who's. So when it comes here, when it comes to your machshava, who knows? Did I go that far? I don't know how deep I went on my thought. So the Rambam writes, the Maisa is just a measuring stick. How do I know I've gone too far? When I took the when I took the actual object, that's Magala, that's revealed that I violated it. But really, it's just technical. In fact, if you have a third party doing the Maisa, it's also lo sachmo. It's not, you don't personally have to do the Maisa. The Maisa is incidental. The point is, it's really an Issa Belev, but the Maisa is an indicator that the Issa Chibud went too far. So even though you have a Maisa, but the fact that Rambam Shittis, even you can do a Maisa, it's still considered a Lav Shei Maisa because the Lav is not defined in terms of the Maisa. So similarly here,
At one stage you already have the object in your possession and you don't return it. You also go with Lo Sachman, but not in the Maisa.
But you already have it, now you're not returning it?
Yeah.
So that should be what? That should be a violation of...
Lo Sachman.
If you have it and don't return it?
Right.
Then I thought, then you already violated Lo Sachman.
No,
maybe you have to...
And then you see it's a beautiful thing, you make the decision, I'm not going to give it back. So I thought that was not the Maisa.
No, that could be a case. You're saying that's in the Rambam.
No, yeah. So once you say it's not a Maisa, in other words.
Yeah, you can say no. Yeah, I saw people bring, but
yeah. So I don't understand why they have to go to the emotional thing. There's a way of finding a case that's.
You can't have a. It's not that you have a heicha timsa. There's a way, and then even if you do it, I don't think that's the mitzvah says. The mitzvah says that if the normative way of doing it.
The Trinity mitzvah says two different ways. One place he says if there's no Maisa, if it can be without a Maisa, there's no left.
Yeah, but in a normative way. Can't find an extreme case.
That might be okay. That might be a way of explaining it. Because mitzvah says.
Because if you really go for an extreme case, you can eliminate a lot of mitzvahs.
Okay. I know that there's whole thing in the mitzvah because the Rambam like in the chinuch, there's an issue in the chinuch between the two. The Rambam holds like the chinuch.
Yeah, it's a big. It's a separate discussion. But on Pesach, there's a kash on the Rambam about Yoy Vayivati. Seems to contradict it. So we'll save that for Pesach time. But getting back here, so that's what they all point out here.
So that's the case with the normative. But is
because he says you don't want because you don't get marked because your pet. What about if you go out and buy chametz? So that's the whole discussion. Like so what? But by definition, it's a lav shein b'maisa.
Right.
But getting back here, so that's what they want to say here in the Rambam. That basically that it's a lav shein b'maisa because really you could go down to Mitzrayim beheter and then stay there. So it's clearly we see the Isser isn't going down. You don't get machas, but it's a lav shein b'maisa. You violate the lav. So it's a nice, interesting explanation by the Ureim and others. But you can't say that's pshat in the Rambam. The Rambam holds the Isser is yeshiva, but Eretz is not going down, and therefore we need another explanation. How do we explain the Rambam or others? How do they live in Egypt? So this is a pretty interesting pre-Chadash. The pre-Chadash says as follows: we know there's an Isser to marry a ger Mitzri. And the Torah gives a different list of people you can't get married to. However, the Rambam writes, "Bizman hazeh, you're permitted to marry a ger Mitzri." Why? Because we don't know who a Mitzri is. Because we all know Sancheir of Melech Ashur did ethnic cleansing. He mixed up all the people, so we don't know exactly who the Egyptians are. So therefore, the Pri Chadash says that you're permitted to marry a ger Mitzri because who says that the person's really from Mitzri? So the Pri Chadash says based on this. I want to say a chiddush over here. So what's the issue of living in Mitzrayim? That's when we knew the people of Mitzrayim are. But today that there are no more Egyptians. Al pi halacha, we don't treat them as Egyptians anymore. And therefore, he claims there's no Isser anymore of living in Mitzrayim. Just like there's no Isser of marrying a Ger Mitzri because we say that they're no longer a Mitzri. The Pri Chodesh wants to say a big Chiddush that you're allowed to live in Egypt now because they're not Egyptians. That's the Chiddush of the Pri Chodesh. Again, very interesting. However, you can't say this shot in the Rambam. Yeah.
So Herod conquer Egypt?
We can conquer the world. I mean,
Well,
he was the
There's
right.
a problem with that.
I don't think he went that
Sarah
far.
was up in the shore, and he didn't go through
Yeah.
Yehuda. And Yehuda had already connection
Yeah.
with Mitzrayim, so there's problems with that idea.
There is probably because the Mordechai, I think, in Yevamah's point, and actually the Mordechai has in a different point. He says and he writes something like Sancher didn't touch.
Egypt,
Most assume not like I've seen most don't assume like the Mordechai, but you're right. Historically, it's hard to figure out how he got there. But the Mordechai writes in Yevamah that I think I saw it the other day because I was looking how to read it twice. I thought he was saying the opposite. He said no. He's saying like you were saying that we do know that they were mixed up in Egypt, so therefore the answer does apply. But let's assume not like that. But
he
you're
actually
right.
says Herod conquered Egypt?
No, he doesn't. No, I think he writes that he doesn't write about Zahidus, but he writes something about a Ger Mitzri. Like we still consider, it was implying. I forgot the exact lesson, but something like Joel was saying. But it's assumed by in all the other svarim that people assume. I don't, how it happened, I don't know. But they assumed he mixed. They assumed the whole world. But I don't know.
From the Psukim, the Isser seems to be more totally in the land rather than in the people. I mean, where does the idea that the people would make the difference, other than saying that
it's
they're
like Kamait Eretz and Shayim, yeah. So he wants to claim right. So that's what he wants to claim. The Pri Chodesh that it's the people who are evil in Egypt. The terrible, the Avodah Zarah's nus, and now they're no longer there. So therefore, you could go back. That's the Pri Chodesh. Why can't you say this pshat in the Rambam? How do I know the Rambam doesn't hold this? Because we see another Rambam. Because what is the Pri Chodesh saying? We know in yeshiva terminology we'll call it an Isser Gavra and Isser Chefsa. Isser Gavra means on the individual. Isser Chefsa on the land. So the Pri Chodesh is saying that the Isser to live in Eretz Yisrael, in Eretz Yisrael is an Isser Gavra. It's the people. Since we don't have the people anymore, so therefore there's no Isser. Like I like pointing out, what's the difference? Why is it that Israel's security is so much better than North America? There's probably many reasons, but the one I'm focused on here is because what's the difference? Because in Israel, they check the Gavra, they're checking for bombers. In North America, they check the Chefsa, they're just checking for bombs. So if you're checking for bombs, who cares if it's a 95-year-old woman or it's a 24-year-old terrorist, a bomb. But in Israel, they check the person, they check the whole package. So either way, so the Pri Chodesh writes to this Gavra. How do I know that's not the pshat in the Rambam? Because there's another Rambam. The Rambam writes, when he talks about the halacha, let's say the Melech Yisrael takes over, starts taking over new land. Again, it's a discussion today whether the Prime Minister or President of Israel has the status of a Melech. Not for now, but
in Syria.
Yeah, so in Syria, but let's say, so he writes, the Rambam writes, if based in, if they take over by a Melech, so then let's say a Jewish king took over Egypt, so he says it's okay then, it's mutter then to live in Eretz Yisrael. But he writes, but anyone else, he says, but let's say anyone else takes over Egypt, the Rambam writes, it's prohibited. So the point being is, the Rambam holds that it's usher to live in Mitzrayim, even if the Egyptians weren't, even if Syria took over. So the Rambam's clear, it's the Chefsa, it's the land of Mitzrayim that's Metame. It reminds me of the Rambam and Perush HaMishnayos. There's the Rashi writes at the end, in the beginning of Parshas Vayechi Yaakov. So Yaakov's asking not to be not the grain of Mitzrayim, don't bury me in Egypt. So Rashi quotes the different Chazals about why not. That one, he was afraid they're going to make another Zohar, and because we all know why not before? Because we know they like taking a dead Jew and making a god out of them. Because once you're dead, you can say anything you want. And then the other one is the mystical pshat, the twilight zone, the Gilgul. And then the other one is he doesn't want to be eaten by the kingdom. So the kasha is, what do you mean? I thought the makas were on the Egyptians, not on the Jews. What was Yaakov afraid of? the kingdom. So it seems to be working. There's a Rambam in Perish HaMishnayos which writes that the kingdom was different than all the other Makkahs. That it wasn't on the same level, but in Goshen also they were affected by the kingdom. And what's the pshat? So Rabbi Sat Apr once say, what's the pshat? What's the pshat on the land? You have to realize no matter where you are, you're still in Chutz La'aretz. You could be in Eretz Goshen, and you gave other examples, but Eretz, where we are today, but Eretz Goshen, and therefore you have to realize that it's still Alzi Chutz La'aretz, and that's what the Rambam says, it's the chefs of the land, it's not just the people, and that's what the Torah writes, because it seems going back to Mitzrayim. In fact, interesting, so that's the interesting pshat by the Pri Chadash, but again, it can't be the pshat in the Rambam, because the Rambam words is the chefsa, while the Pri Chadash words is the Gavra. It's a very interesting pshat, the Bali Kabbalah like saying, that why is there an Isser to go back to Mitzrayim now? Because, again, it's our Kabbalah, so I don't really understand what I'm saying, but I can just say it. You'll know as much as I do after I just tell you what it says, but basically that when you go into part of the whole thing, we know the Jews are going to be in Golis and all the different lands were spread out the Arab. And part of it, we go through all these parts of the lands, and we have sometimes in the tzitzus, we learn out something, we get everything from all the parts, we're going to put it together. So he's saying, so now we're in Canada, there's something to learn, America, but Egypt, we already got everything we had to, and there's nothing left for us to go, so that's why it's us to go back. The only head to be in other places is, I'll be Kabbalah, there's some things you could get out. But either way, so the difference, we try to suggest 4 different explanations. What's the pshat in the Rambam? Why was he able to live in Mitzrayim, even though he didn't write over B'chol Yom Al Shlosh Olavim? So we suggested the Ritva in Yuma that said the issue is only when there's a Beis HaMikdash. But Bizman Hazeh, there's no Beis HaMikdash, and the Jews are spread all over. Kol Chutz La'aretz Shava. The whole Chutz La'aretz is equal, and therefore it's okay to live in Egypt. Obviously not the pshat in the Rambam, because the Rambam writes Mutter L'Shchol B'chol Olam Chutz Mitzrayim. Well, I'm at it, even though I'm giving a chumrah that according to the Rambam you can't visit Mitzrayim, but rather in on a kula, that we see parenthetically in the Rambam that there's a whole discussion in the poskim and about living in these places in the South Pole, North Pole, because of the times and it never gets dark and light. So we see that clearly according to the Rambam it's mutter. The Rambam says it's mutter to live anywhere in the world except for Mitzrayim. But that's why you can't say that pshat in the Rambam, the Ritva. The other pshat with the Mari Kasher of Castro, interesting that Cairo is a new city. That's why you write in the Gin, Cairo as Samach Egypt. And the Isser is only where the Jews were enslaved. That's where you can't go back. But Cairo, which is a new city, so therefore you'd be able to join the rally if you're interested, according to this pshat, because Cairo's not considered Egypt. Exactly. However, according, it's difficult to say that in the Rambam, because the Rambam himself seems to include it in his definition of Egypt. And thirdly, we said the Sefer HaYereim or Lezem Mimitzi points out that the Isser is going from Egypt, from Eretz Yisrael to Egypt. And that's why Eldon Hadani said the 42 steps, I was careful not to follow the exact ways, but according to the Isser is in going, the Isser is going down, and that's not the pshat in the Rambam, because the Rambam says the Isser is the yeshiva, because the Rambam writes you could go down to Mitzrayim on business purposes, and you could end up in mutter, and then end up violating it by staying, but it's a lav she'im bo maisa, you don't get makas. But we see the Isser is the yeshiva, not the alicha, so it's a nice pshat, you can't say it in the Rambam. And the fourth about the Pri Chadash is also very interesting. It's on Isser Gavra, that we don't know just like we don't know who the Egyptians are, so therefore they're not Egyptians, so therefore the halacha of living in Egypt doesn't apply, because they don't have not the same terrible midas etc. that the Isser was. So according to the Pri Chadash, it's an Isser Gavra, but according to the Rambam, it's clearly an Isser Chefsa, because the Rambam writes even if another nation takes over Egypt, it still wants it to live there, even if they throw all the Egyptians out, because the Isser is on the Chefsa. So after all said and done, as Joel alluded to, I didn't want him to say it in the beginning of my shir, but all the answers are very difficult in the Rambam, and many times it's not always the fancy explanations, it's usually the simple explanation which are true. And the truth probably is, the reason why the Rambam lived in Egypt, it wasn't by choice. Maybe he came down by choice, maybe he didn't. But once he was there, he certainly couldn't leave because he was the doctor, and whether they wouldn't let him leave. Even if he did it, maybe he'd endanger the people who stayed around. They'd kill him, they'd put him in jail. So the bottom line is that's why the Rambam, he was definitely not over. There's no way the Rambam would willfully violate 301 Rabban by staying there. That's why it's a famous story they say over with Rav Chaim. That, saying the pshat is you look for the simple pshat is usually emes. So we know Rav Chaim, Soloveitchik, the Briskers, they spent a lifetime working on the Rambam and revolutionizing, giving pshatim, and the Rambam didn't say very little. That's the Chaz and Ish's kinda on all the Briskers. Like, he's saying all these tremendous chidushim, and the Rambam didn't spell it out. There's no way the Rambam meant this. But the Briskers obviously disagree. And Rav Chaim, was one of them. So they say over the story, you could make, depends if you want to make fun of. You could make fun of Briskers, Tells, or whoever you want. But this story is about Rav Chaim, so we'll keep to the Briskers. So they go over Rav Chaim after however old he was. He, I was going to say 120, but I don't know how old he was. I don't know what his age was. But whenever he went up to Shamayim, I think in fact someone told me on the tombstone or Rav Chaim, it says nothing about his lumdis, but Ish HaChesed or something. But either way, he went up to Shamayim and he runs, he sees the Rambam. Wow, Shalom Aleichem, they have a great talk. Wow, I owe you everything. I spent my whole life. Don't worry, I know who you are. You're Rav Chaim, all that. So I actually have two Rambams that had so much difficulty with. Please help me out. I just couldn't figure. So he says one, I have a kasha on Rambam. Or the Rambam, oh, great question. He goes into the whole long shtickle Torah, all the Brisker Lumdis, it's great. Okay, great. And I have one more Rambam. So the Rambam says, no, I didn't say that was a typing error. So the Rav Chaim slaps the Rambam across the face and says, that's not the way you learn a Rambam. So the bicycle, sometimes, you try to, whether it's the Rambam or anything else, a lot of times you try to come up, you have to give a shiur. So I couldn't just get up and say that you had to live there. So you have to give all the fancy answers first. The Ritva, Rav Castro, the Pri Chadash, Rav Elamimins, but ultimately, and the Lumdis is true. There are aspects of truth, but probably the simple explanation why the Rambam was there is because he was honest. He had no choice in the matter.